Today is the first time that I've actually been next to the car since the accident 2 years ago. I've seen pictures of it since then, but I've never actually been up to it close in person. But pulling up on it, my heart just dropped. I mean, there's two things to think about. At one point, this is like my car. I worked so hard to pay for it, and it's now like this because I was speeding. But I don't care about the car at all, to be honest with you. Just looking at the car, it brings back so many memories of the night that Tanya died, and it just really hurts to look at the car and know that she died because of this accident. It's just really tough trying to get anywhere without a license. I mean, you don't really realize how bad it is until it actually happens. I mean, having a license is very good to have. I mean, in order to do any daily activities that you need to have done.
Tanya was actually born 6 weeks early. She weighed 3 pounds, 12 ounces. And I remember going, after she was born, I remember going into the prenatal nursery and to see her. And she was so tiny. She fit in the palm of my husband's hand. Ever since Tanya was a little girl, she was the most particular. Everything had to be her way from the time she was born. She couldn't stand to be wet. She couldn't stand to be dirty. Tanya had the most giggly personality. She was so happy. We found out that Tanya was going to have a little sister.
Growing up, my life was great. And me and Tanya always went to the park and we rode our bikes, and Tanya and I liked coming to Garden of the Gods. We go to the mountains, Helen Hunt Falls. We were very outdoorsy.
When they were little, they were the best of friends. They did everything together. You would take them outside to play, and Tanya was always the one who, she would come inside every 10 minutes having to change her clothes. She could not stand to be dirty. Her favorite expression was, she'd come in the house, she'd go, "I dirty," and we'd have to change. Chelsea'd come in, Chelsea would be covered from head to toe in mud. From the time Tanya was little until she was older, we kind of knew Tanya was going to do something with modeling, or Tanya was going to do something with hair. From the time Tanya was 7, 8 years old, she was doing things to her sister's hair.
When I was younger, I used to always say that I wanted to be a police officer or fireman or something like that. But as I got older, I just got more and more into cars, and I'm actually still managing a Jiffy Lube where I worked before the accident. I was in school at the time of the accident, but I just couldn't go back. I mean, I went back one night and it just didn't feel right. People were staring at me and they didn't know what was going on, but they knew me by name, so they knew exactly what had happened from the news.
Tanya's whole world turned around when she met Brandon. I've always been a strong believer that there's someone in this world for everybody, and I honestly truly think Brandon was that for her. And Brandon treated her like she was royalty. I mean, it was the first time that she had really had a young gentleman treat her like she was a woman. And Tanya was right on course to graduate. First time in Tanya's life she made the A honor roll. And I think it was all because of her relationship with Brandon. She had turned her whole life around. She had set goals for herself.
It was just great. They fell in love so fast, and I know they were in love.
Well, when me and Tanya first started hanging out, I noticed more and more when we would go ride in the car that she didn't have her seatbelt on. She didn't like the way the seatbelt went around her body because she was so much smaller. It just bothered her, she said. I was actually getting her into the groove of putting it on when I put mine on. But that night I actually didn't get out of the car when she did, and I already had mine on, so I really think that if I put mine back on that night, if I got out of the car with her, she probably would have had hers on.
Tanya always, from the time she started driving, hated seatbelts. I don't know if it would confine her because she didn't like the pressure of a seatbelt running across her or what, but it was always something you could not get her to wear a seatbelt. And when the crash happened and I found out Tanya didn't have a seatbelt on, that I think that was the one thing that Brandon repeated over and over and over to me. He says, "Grandma, why didn't I make her?"
She needs to wear a seatbelt. That way she can still be here with me, to see me and my son, and she could be an aunt, and she could probably be married, have kids of her own.
On the night of the accident, we all met over at the Wendy's off Montebello, where I live, and some of my other friends from high school pulled in the parking lot getting food, and we all kind of started talking, and we wanted to go do something.
I don't know what possessed me, but about 10 o'clock, I think it was, or 10:30, maybe even a little later, I had sent Tanya a text. I had called her, she didn't answer her phone, so I sent her a text. Tanya taught me how to text. And I sent her a text, and I told her, I said, what time do you think you're coming home? Because I'm probably going to head to bed soon. And she hadn't written me back. And I remember in her text saying, "I love you." And about an hour or so after that is when we got the first phone call telling us there'd been an accident.
Later that night, they had asked me how fast they thought I was going, and I told them 65. And later on, my crash investigator found out that I had hit the curb around 70, 71, or I think 71 was the speed. Speed limit in that area of the accident was 45. So this is where the crash happened. I was coming up around this hill right here in the right lane, and that's initially where I lost control of the car, and I hit the rocks right here and rolled spun around about right here, and then started to roll right at about this median, and the car landed about 10 feet past that pole. I think it was ejected out of the car like probably right around that sign there. And I know she landed around right over there right near that tree somewhere. I remember it was the night after it had stopped snowing, so there was sand on the road, and I just think that one of my tires hit gravel in the front right, and I've never been into an accident like that, so I didn't know how to get the car back into control, and it started to spin, and it hit the curb, and the car rolled. And I remember the whole time the car was rolling, it seemed like it was forever, because I don't know if I ever lost consciousness, but I could see rocks by my window, and I remember hearing Tanya scream. And finally, when the car stopped, there was smoke everywhere and dust, and when the dust disappeared, I saw that she wasn't in the car anymore. So I got out of my car and I ran through traffic. I just saw her laying in the road and cars were still going by, so I didn't know what to do. And I drug her closer to the curb so that no one could hit her. And I just looked into her eyes and she was staring up at me, and I didn't know if she could see me or what, but that's when I was pushed away from her and I was forced to call my mom. So I called my mom and told her what happened, and she started to cough. So I went over to her and I performed CPR on her. And I remember asking if I could go with her, but they said I couldn't go with her. And I was put into a police car when she was taken to the hospital. And on the way to the police station, I remember reading the computer and it said deadly brain injuries. And at that point, I didn't think she was gonna make it. And that next morning, I was taken to the Falcon Division, where they told me that Tanya had passed away. And that was after I was taken to the hospital to see her, but I couldn't do it. I didn't want to remember her like that. Sorry. I felt lost. I was ruined. because I loved her and I knew she loved me, and things were going so much better than I've ever had with a girlfriend, and I wanted to marry her. I wanted to help her through school, and it was all gone, just like that.
I think the best thing for me in the world, and I thank God for it every day, is that I got to say goodbye to her.
On the morning after the crash, I was taken to the hospital, and I sat there for 2 hours, and finally me and another officer left, and they took me to the Falcon Division, where they told me what my new charges were because Tanya had passed away. And I never got out of the car there. From there, they drove me straight to the jail.
Tanya died about 5:45 the next morning. We stayed at the hospital for about another hour or so after that. They came in, they cleaned her up. We all came in as a family and said goodbye to her.
When I saw Tanya in the hospital, I didn't think that it was her. It didn't look like her at all, and it was just crazy because there was blood everywhere, and it was the most horrible sight I've ever seen.
So many family members were so angry at Brandon. But I knew how much Tanya loved Brandon, and I knew how much Brandon loved Tanya. And there was no way that I could even, not for 1 minute from the time she passed away till now, have I ever had an angry thought, because I know what Brandon's going through. What Brandon's going through is worse than what I have to go through, because he has to live with this the rest of his life.
Till this day, I don't think I still have forgiven myself, because I know that if she was in a seatbelt, that she would have survived. And I just feel like she looked up to me to remind her to put her seatbelt on anytime we got in the car. And I just feel like I failed her.